A towering killer who knew exactly how dangerous he was. A wilderness drifter who finally confessed on camera just because he was about to die. And a guy who stood in front of news cameras pretending to be shocked when the body in the creek was his own mom. These are disturbing interviews with evil people caught on camera. Edmund Kemper was and still is a pretty intimidating looking guy, standing at 6'9", and that combined with his above average IQ and his calm demeanor means this guy was incredibly dangerous, as he could lure his victims in and take advantage of them with his size. And in interviews, which there are plenty of, that calm, dare I say it, engaging personality really comes through, and that is very scary.
It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about. And then destruction of things that are living on a lower level, small animals, insects, animals, and then finally people.
Known as the co-ed killer, he targeted female college students in the early 70s, usually hitchhikers, then did things so horrific to their bodies afterward, it's just better left unsaid. What makes his interviews so chilling is how casually he talks about all of this stuff. And asked why he started, Kemper said, "I just wondered what it would be like to shoot grandma." He was 15 years old when he did exactly that, taking out both grandparents just to see how it felt. Later, in an interview with FBI agents, Kemper calmly described what he did to his mother, and he made one of the most chilling statements I've ever heard.
I cut off her head, and I humiliated her corpse.
What's really eerie about Kemper, aside from how damn normal he sounds while talking about some of the most twisted things you can imagine, is how oddly self-aware he is in his interviews. He's so self-analytical, so different from guys like Charles Manson who just come off like these unhinged lunatics. Kemper once said he knew he was a walking time bomb. He knew exactly how dangerous he was, but he didn't hide from it. It's one thing to commit horrific acts, it's another to know what you're doing is evil and to just accept and embrace it anyway. Gary Michael Hilton just recently confessed on camera to a crime everyone pretty much knew he was responsible for, but he'd never actually come out and said it. Known as the National Forest serial killer, Hilton used his survival skills to hide in plain sight while targeting people in remote parks across multiple states. His crimes stretched from Georgia to Florida to North Carolina, and yet for years no one connected the dots. Hilton finally broke his silence in an interview at 78 years old, saying simply, "It's time." Staring right into the camera, he admits to something he denied for 17 years.
I'm gonna give you a news scoop. I did it. So there you have it.
You did it.
Yes, I'm confessing to a murder on camera.
When asked why now, his response was just because I'm going to die soon. He also had no issue labeling himself. Sort of. When the interview asked if he was a psychopath, Hilton replied, "No." Sociopath? He said, "I have part of that in me." And when the term serial killer was brought up, he just missed it, just saying it was no big deal, or a dime a dozen. In June of 2018, Matthew Haverly stood in front of local news cameras outside his home in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. A body had been discovered in a nearby creek, and reporters were gathering interviews with residents to get their reactions. Haverly gave the impression of a guy just as shocked as everyone else, casually throwing around theories and going into all this detail about how it was probably a hit and that it would be a good place to dump a body.
It would be like a place where people from the city would want to put a body because most likely they wouldn't be found.
He even addressed how
The whole time he has this slight smirk on his face. He's just saying way too much. He's attempting to rock a mohawk, except he's balding. The guy would just be on my list of suspects immediately, and unsurprisingly, it turned out he killed the woman in the creek. What was surprising was that it was his own mother. Authorities later determined she'd been struck in the head and dumped in the creek behind their home. He ended up pleading no contest to charges including involuntary manslaughter, tampering with evidence, and more. Gary Ridgway, dubbed the Green River Killer, targeted women in Washington state from the early 80s to the late 90s. He'd pick up women, earn their trust, and then take their lives in secluded areas. Ridgway later admitted that he chose his victims carefully, often targeting those less likely to be reported missing right away. In his interviews, what's most disturbing isn't just what he says, it's how casually he says it. At one point, Ridgway admits he used a photo of his son to get his victims to feel comfortable.
Every time I opened up my wallet, there would be a picture of my son on one side, behind my ID. Here's my ID, I hide my name, and they'd see that, and that would lower any big defenses.
In another moment, he describes a time he picked up a woman while his son was sleeping in his car. I killed her, he says flatly, and I'm real sure my son didn't see it. Ridgway confessed to so many killings he said he lost count. Some believe the real number may be as high as 90. In court, Ridgway showed little emotion except when the families of his victims spoke, and even then, it was hard to tell if it was real remorse or just a show. On November 2nd, 1966, a sewing machine salesman named Woodrow Derenberger was driving home near Parksburg, West Virginia, when a large gray object suddenly appeared and blocked the highway. A tall man with dark hair emerged from the craft and walked directly toward Derenberger's car. The man introduced himself as Indrid Cold. Thing is, he wasn't speaking to Derenberger out loud. He seemed to be communicating telepathically. He claimed to be a, quote, searcher from a planet called Lunalos, somewhere in what he called the galaxy of Ganymede. The most unsettling detail about this story is the man's face. He had a permanent fixed smile, but it wasn't friendly. It was unnatural, emotionless, almost like an alien's best attempt at appearing human. Derenberger described it as deeply unnerving. This wasn't the last time he'd encounter Indrid Cold either. Derenberger claimed that Cold contacted him repeatedly after that night and that they had ongoing telepathic conversations. Derenberger also said he was taken to Lunalos on 2 separate occasions. Other witnesses also came forward. Multiple people confirmed seeing this strange smiling man speaking with Derenberger on the side of the road that first night. In 1863, on a quiet beach in Sandy Cove, Nova Scotia, a young boy named Collie Albright discovered a man lying in the sand. The man was in terrible condition. Both of his legs had been amputated below the knee. The wounds had partially healed, but they were still raw. The cold was close to killing him. Collie ran for help, and villagers carried the man back to town to try and save him. Once they got him stable, they tried to figure out who this guy was, and they got nowhere. The guy barely spoke, aside from the occasional mumble, which didn't even sound like English. Villagers tried every other language they could think of: French, Italian, Spanish, Latin, and he just gave them nothing. If someone bothered him too much, he would growl like an animal. When someone asked what his name was, he seemed to mutter something that sounded sorta like Jerome, so that became his name. They thought maybe he was a sailor, but his hands were soft, not the rough, calloused hands of someone who'd worked on ships. Collie's family couldn't afford to care for him permanently, so Jerome was moved from household to household. Eventually he was taken to the French community Matagan because people assumed he might be Catholic. He spent years living with a man named Jean Nicolas, and later the Como family, who actually charged admission for people to come see him like he was some sort of circus act. Jerome died in 1912, never having explained who he was or where he came from. The Starseed movement is a lot bigger than most people realize. These are people who believe their souls originated in other star systems. They claim they reincarnated on Earth with a specific purpose: to help humanity evolve spiritually, to raise its vibration, prevent war, or guide the planet into some higher form of existence. It's a bunch of BS, but the movement has exploded online. You'll find plenty of starseeds on TikTok, countless videos with titles like 10 Signs You're a Starseed or Why You Never Felt at Home on Earth. And some people claim they actually have memories of past lives on other planets. The whole thing grew out of older New Age philosophy and has now merged with all this internet self-help culture. Now there are starseed retreats, coaches, people who speak what they call light language, which they claim is how their souls communicate across dimensions. Now, to be fair to some of these people, some of them just view it as a kind of metaphorical thing. They just feel kind of different or alienated from mainstream society and don't actually think they're from another planet, which is fair enough. I'd place myself maybe in that camp as well. But others do take it very literally. Omnek Onek claims she's from Venus. Not metaphorically. She says she was born there and lived on Venus for hundreds of years before coming to Earth in 1955 as a 7-year-old girl. According to her, she arrived here on a spiritual mission to help humanity evolve. Her book, From Venus I Came, describes the civilization on Venus in detail. She talks about their cities, how society is run. For decades, she's given lectures and interviews, presenting herself as an ambassador from Venus. Now, there's an obvious problem here. By the 50s, scientists already knew that Venus was hot enough to melt lead, so not exactly a place that could support life, but her explanation for this is that her people exist on this higher vibrational frequency that our basic technology just can't detect, a place beyond our physical reality. And finally, David Huggins doesn't just claim that aliens exist or that he saw one once. He says he's had an ongoing relationship with one for most of his life. According to him, his first encounter happened when he was just a young boy. Over the decades that followed, he says he's fathered dozens of hybrid children with a female extraterrestrial named Crescent. Huggins documents everything through painting. This home is filled with hundreds of paintings depicting his experiences, scenes of Crescent visiting him, his weird hybrid alien children, encounters with other small gray alien beings. His artwork attracted enough attention that a documentary was even made about his life called Love and Saucers. What stands out about Huggins is how matter-of-fact he is when describing these experiences. He talks about them the way you'd describe a past relationship. Doesn't present it as traumatic. He's not saying he's been given special abilities or knowledge of the future. It just is what it is. A voice on an answering machine, carrying on a full conversation its owner swears he never had. Two teens in a summer camp are pulled into the sky by lights, and a college student preps for an assignment that suddenly vanishes. Was it the assignment that disappeared though, or did they somehow switch to another reality? These are more mysterious times people claim to visit a parallel world and came back changed. From Reddit user Flamingo comes an unsettling experience with an answering machine. Goes as follows. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, "Hey, it's me, kill all extremists. Sorry, I missed you. Call you later. Bye," and then hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he calls me back and he says, "Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, there was a slight pause, and then it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so, with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I did not recognize. You could compare it to the message I know I did leave. The two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but, the talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that records the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and analyzed, unfortunately. Also, I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky. I can't explain it. Back in the summer of 1968, two teenagers working at a summer camp in Vermont, 16-year-old Michael Lapp and 19-year-old Janet Carnell, were just hanging out by the dock, watching the sun set over Lake Champlain. Most of the camp was empty because the kids were away at a swim meet. Pretty peaceful scene, but it didn't last. Michael spotted a weird light in the sky. At first he figured it was just a star, but then it suddenly dropped and started coming toward them. Soon, 3 smaller lights broke off from the main glow and started zigzagging over the water in ways no plane or helicopter could. The lights got closer, formed a triangle, and then one dove straight into the lake. Michael described the sound that followed like a, quote, 1,000 tuning forks, which is such an oddly specific comparison to make. Then he noticed a transparent dome on the craft, and inside were what he described as 2 childlike creatures with big heads, long necks, and huge eyes. The craft shot a beam at them, so Michael grabbed Janet and pulled her down as they felt themselves begin floating into the air. The next thing they knew, they were back sitting on the dock. But it was much later. Both were disoriented, and Janet seemed almost in a trance. Years later, Michael started having recurring nightmares, always about being taken. He recalled being inside the ship, seeing Janet examined, looking up through the dome at Earth and the stars. Janet later recalled the event, describing it almost exactly as Michael had, only she hadn't spoken to him in years. Researcher Walter Webb eventually concluded that the two had, quote, no opportunity for collusion, and that they'd experienced a, quote, real external event of unknown origin. Reddit user MissPack01 had a very odd experience with a school assignment. They write, I'm going to college in British Columbia, Canada, and I'm taking a business class. So first week of February, our teacher talks about an assignment that'll be due March 2nd. It's a 3-page paper with references on something we've learned in the class. That night he posts a little thing about due date and expectation and formatting, blah blah blah. I start the paper early to get it out of the way, but of course, life and work get in the way, so I forget about it for a week. Fast forward to yesterday's class and I start freaking out about the assignment. I go to my folder on the computer and it's not there for some reason. Oh no, maybe I forgot to save. Unlikely, but possibly. So when I get to class, I ask him if he wants it submitted online, because I didn't see a Dropbox, or handed in physically on Monday. Here's where it gets weird. He doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about. Says there never was any assignment. I got him to look on the course site where he posted the outline and nothing was there. I asked a couple classmates and nobody had a clue what I was talking about either. This is so weird. I'm only taking 2 classes as I work full time, so no, I did not get the assignment mixed with another class. In the last month, did I somehow walk through a door to another universe? Well, I can't tell you for sure, Redditor, but if I switched to a parallel universe that meant everything stayed normal, but I no longer had homework due, I would count that as a win. This one comes from a Redditor named Carla Ray 14, and if the title of the post, I'm convinced my parallel universe self was speaking to my family, doesn't creep you out already, then just listen to this. So about 5 years before she made the post, Carla's parents and 2 sisters were traveling around Europe. She stayed home with her husband and their baby. Well, one night at 3 a.m., her phone starts ringing. It's her dad. She ignores it at first, thinking maybe he forgot about the time difference, but then it rings again and again. When she finally checks her phone, she sees a dozen missed calls and a pile of messages from her family, all saying things like, everything will be okay, we're going to get the next flight home to be with you, stay strong, we love you. Completely freaked out, she answers the next call and demands to know what's going on. Her dad, sounding really shaken, tells her, I've just been on the phone with you for an hour. What do you mean, what's going on? He insists that she called him in tears, saying her husband left her after she told him she was pregnant. Carla's husband was literally asleep beside her though. She says, Dad, what are you talking about? He's right here. He hasn't walked out on me, and I'm definitely not pregnant. Her family swore it was her voice on the line though. Even her sister said she talked with Carla during the call, heard a friend in the background, and got details like Carla canceling her dentist appointment. Something that was actually true, but only her husband knew about. Carla had to send a photo of her and her husband right then and there to prove that nothing happened. And to this day, her dad just shakes his head and says, I don't know what to believe. Is it possible someone was just making a prank call? I mean, I guess maybe, but they guessed a lot of specific details if that's the case. Is it also possible that some version of Carla from a parallel universe managed to call her dad in this one? I don't know. What do you guys think? 6 years ago, Reddit user Peeny Bino shared a pretty unsettling experience. She was driving to work, stopped in a left turn lane when a car pulled up behind her. Out of nowhere, this intense cold fear hit her. It was like she just knew the car was going to crash into them. The car behind stopped gently a few yards back, but the fear didn't go away. Then things got even weirder. She felt this sudden jolt through her body, so strong it felt like the car actually moved with her. Checking the rear mirror, the other car was still there. The light turned green, and just before she took her foot off the brake, an excruciating pain exploded in her neck and head. She also noticed a strong smell and a taste of gasoline. It was overwhelming. She slowly rolled down the window, moved through the intersection, and gave an apologetic wave to the driver behind her. Pino Bino pulled into the office parking lot, trembling. The pain and gasoline smell, they eventually went away, but she was still shaken for the rest of the day. She even felt afraid to get back into the car at the end of the day. She called her fiancé, who joked, Maybe you died in a car accident in an alternate universe and you felt it. Pino Bino just laughed that off at the time, but says she hasn't been able to shake that idea since. Years ago, a now deleted Reddit user shared a haunting story in an Ask Reddit thread about feeling a deep connection to someone they met in a dream. He explained that during his last semester at college, he was tackled by a massive football player, 325 pounds compared to his 120. He was unconscious for a little bit, but ended up being okay. He met an amazing woman, and after months of chasing her and dealing with a few jerk boyfriends, they ended up getting married. Soon after, they had a daughter. He had a good job, his wife stayed home to take care of the kid, and when their daughter was 2, they had a son. Life was almost picture perfect, but one day, while sitting on the couch, he noticed something off about a lamp in his room. Its perspective was inverted, like it was 3D, but just wrong. He couldn't look away, staying up all night staring at it. The next morning, he didn't go to work. Over the next few days, he stopped eating and barely left the couch, completely fixated on this lamp. His wife started getting worried, called someone to talk to him, but he knew something was really wrong here. It was like his mind was unraveling. Eventually, he had an epiphany. That lamp wasn't real. Neither was his house, the wife, the kids, or the last 10 years of his life. That's when the lamp grew bigger in his vision, turning everything red while he heard screams and felt intense pain. And he suddenly woke up, lying on the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers. He was still on the ground, just having come back too from being tackled by the football player. In the brief time he'd been unconscious, he'd imagined an entire life. But it felt very real to him, too real. In his own words, I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children, dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane, as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He's perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says. This next story comes from Gunzo, who said he once dreamed he was driving home, listening to old music, when he spotted a badly damaged car on the side of the road. He stops, calls for help, and finds an unconscious young woman with short curly blonde hair inside. Drags her out, gives her first aid, until an ambulance arrives. When he glanced back at the woman though, she was suddenly wide awake and shocked, and that's when he woke up. Well, weeks go by, and his uncle gives him a family photo collage for his birthday. Among the pictures was his mom, young, pregnant at the time. She was also covered in scars. In fact, she looked exactly like the woman from his dream. When he told his dad about this, his dad said, well, a man rescued his mom after a car accident 25 years earlier, and then mysteriously vanished. Redditor this_IUS shared a strange story about his friend Gavin, who he said was incredibly smart, like higher IQ than anyone he knew. This happened when they were teens. One day, the Reddit user made an impromptu stop at Gavin's place. He knocked on the door and was shocked when a middle-aged man answered. It was not Gavin's dad. And things only got stranger. When he asked if Gavin was home, the man said, "I am Gavin." The man looked very confused. After some back and forth, the man was like, okay, yeah, he'll be back later. It seemed he just wanted to be left alone. Well, later, when the Redditor told Gavin about this, Gavin insisted no one else had been there, and he'd been home the whole time, too. This led to a theory. Had that middle-aged man actually been Gavin, a future version of him that had somehow, briefly, slipped back in time? People silently dancing in empty streets, strangers standing inches away from sleeping families, and mysterious figures captured on trail cams. These are more mysterious people caught clearly on camera. If you've been on the spooky side of the internet in the past few years, you've probably seen videos of the Serbian dancing lady. You're walking alone at night on a quiet street, maybe after a late shift or grabbing snacks, when out of nowhere, you spot this woman dancing. Not in a group of people. There's not even any music playing. She's just alone in the middle of the night, silently dancing. The first real sighting of this goes back to September 2019, outside a hospital in Zvezdara, Serbia. It caught this strange woman dancing on camera, and the clip blew up on TikTok. That same woman also apparently started threatening people with a blade. Real case. The cops tried tracking her down, but they never found her. That one encounter alone was enough to kick off a whole wave of copycats online, but the original video still haunts people. And just like that, the Serbian dancing lady became something of an internet urban legend. Now, it may take a couple moments to notice it, but this is a pretty creepy image. What's that thing poking out of the left-hand side of the frame? The picture was posted to Reddit by OG_Cheddar Goblin, who said it was originally posted to Facebook by his friend's uncle. We see what's clearly a deer, and then this mysterious figure looming behind it. Something that is clearly not another deer. It looks like a person. Sorta. The Redditor said it could be a person in a hoodie, but also thinks it's strange that a deer would just let someone stand right behind it like that. Deer are incredibly skittish. Is this a person, another animal, or something else entirely? What do you all think? Share your thoughts down below. Reddit user NoInitial5621 posted this image with the heading, "Caught this on my trail cam last night. What do you all think it is?" Now obviously it's a person, looks like a woman in a long coat, so people asked for some context here, and the uploader said that they live on a mountaintop about 10 miles from town and 2 miles from the nearest paved road. There's only one neighbor within walking distance, but that neighbor never comes onto their property, and if they do, it's only on the driveway, never on the side of the house. Their trail camera has captured foxes, deer, bears, mountain lions, and rabbits, but never a person. So who exactly was this, and why were they there? We'll probably never know. In 2015 in Queens, New York, around 2:20 a.m., an unknown man somehow got inside a family's home and was caught on multiple cameras, including one pointed at a bedroom where a father and mother were sleeping. Their kids were in the next room. The footage shows the suspect quietly moving through the living room before crawling into the bedroom on his hands and knees. At one point, he even carried a blade in his mouth as he made his way across the floor towards the dresser. Now, unfortunately, I don't think this footage is really available online, most of it anyway, just to protect the family's identities, but then this happened. Little did the intruder know the parents were still awake. At first, they thought it was one of their kids crawling around. The whole thing was recorded on their baby monitor camera, set up so they could watch their kids sleeping in the other room. The intruder pulled a cell phone out of the dresser before the dad shouted. The suspect took off. Police described him as about 6'2", around 200 pounds, dressed in all black with a black snow cap that had the word diamond on it. To my knowledge, the guy was never caught. Here's another strange one. Now, looking at this image alone, you probably wouldn't think much of it. Looks like two people unloading groceries or something. The man with his back to the camera by the car is the uploader. Reddit user has been very fried. He said he'd recently bought security cameras for his front and back porches, which take pictures when there's movement. While he was reviewing images from that day, he noticed this strange figure standing at the back of the car. That's right, he had no idea who or what that other figure was. Whoever or whatever they are, though, they look like they're lending a helping hand on loading stuff. This next image was posted to Reddit by Smash Delete, who said it came from their friend's brother. He was at work when he was notified of movement on his camera app. Thing is, he lives alone. Yeah, no way I'd be going home without protection that night. The more I do these types of videos, the more I really consider buying some home security cameras myself. Things really seem to happen a lot right under people's noses, especially on doorbell cameras. But then I also do all these videos about home security cameras being hacked and people watching you. I don't know what to do anymore. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, it seems. But what do we all think the figure in this image is? Was it a home intruder? Some commenters said it could be dust floating by. It doesn't really look like dust to me. Of course, there's always the paranormal explanation too. Like always, what do you all think? Two parents thought they might have spotted their missing daughter, Lori, 4 years after she disappeared. In 1980, while staying in California, they were watching a documentary and noticed an extra in the film who looked just like her. They tried reaching out to the filmmakers, but they couldn't track her down. The next year, the filmmaker released another documentary called Whatever Happened to Lori Jean Lloyd to raise awareness about the case, but it didn't turn up any new leads. Lori was a teenager in Kettering, Ohio, when she vanished on February 11th, 1976. That evening, she'd been babysitting her nephew with a friend. Her mother dropped off a pizza, Lori thanked her, and everything seemed fine. Later that night, Anita returned and realized that Lori was gone. The friend and nephew were asleep, and when the friend woke up, she said Lori had left to walk 3 blocks to a convenience store to buy cigarettes. The employees at the shop never saw her that night, though. Her mother searched the area, but she couldn't find her. Police didn't immediately take the case seriously because Lori had a history of running away, but her family knew that this was different. She always called to check in, and she usually stayed with friends. This time she hadn't. Some friends said Lori had mentioned wanting to move to California with her father and had planned to meet a boy that night who might help her get there. If he existed, no one ever identified him. Lori left behind all her personal belongings, including a small bank account, untouched. For years, her disappearance remained a total mystery. But in 2016, she was tentatively identified as a Jane Doe, found in Grant County, Kentucky, based on dental records. While law enforcement hasn't officially confirmed it, her family did accept that the remains were hers. In Lytham, England, late at night on July 18, 2025, something really strange showed up on a dash cam. It was a nude guy wearing nothing but a black mask and sneakers, just walking through the quiet streets. The footage ended up on a local WhatsApp group and then Facebook, and people couldn't stop talking about it. One local said, "It's a GIMP mask. I've watched the footage. I have no idea what he thinks he's doing." Another added, "In the days after we saw a young man fully clothed walking around the streets, looking up and around, seemingly checking for cameras, we think it's the same man." Lancashire police confirmed that they were reviewing the footage and checking the area, saying, "We are aware of a concerning video circulating on social media of a naked male wearing a face covering walking around Lytham in the early hours of the morning. This incident was not initially reported to police and has only been brought to our attention after it has been viewed on Facebook." What you're looking at here is security footage from Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas, and the person in it has never been identified. On April 18, 2016, 45-year-old fitness instructor Missy Bevers was found dead inside this church. She'd arrived early around 4 a.m. to set up for one of her classes, and by 5 a.m. a student discovered her body. She'd been attacked with multiple puncture wounds to the head and chest, and a hammer was found nearby. The surveillance video taken just before the attack shows someone dressed head to toe in SWAT-style tactical gear calmly walking through the building. They open doors, they smash windows, and they move with a noticeable limp or kind of awkward gait, like they might be dragging a leg. Police haven't confirmed if the intruder was male or female. Missy's iPad or personal belongings were all untouched though, so this person wasn't there for valuables. There was one suspicious vehicle, a 2010 to maybe 2012 Nissan Altima, seen circling the parking lot at 2 a.m. with headlights flashing, but that driver was never identified. Missy had also gotten some strange messages on LinkedIn from a man before her death. To this day, despite all the footage, the hammer, the tactical gear, and the eerie limp, no one knows who this person was. No one knows who killed Missy Bevers or why. Now, we've talked about this one recently, but it does fit too perfectly into this list to skip. In June 2009, a man using the name Peter Bergman checked into a small hotel in Sligo, Ireland. From the very start, his behavior was strange. Almost all of it was caught on CCTV around the city. Over several days, cameras followed him walking calmly through town, always wearing the same black outfit, carrying a purple plastic bag. He stopped at random locations, pulled items out of the bag, and carefully tossed them into public trash bins. When the man was later found, he had no ID, no labeled clothes, and no traceable documents of any kind. The name Peter Bergman was fake, and they couldn't ask him his real name because all they had was a body. The man was dead. On June 16th, CCTV shows him leaving the hotel for the last time and walking toward a beach. His body was found days later. He drowned, and no one's ever came forward to identify him or explain who he is or why he did what he did. Lars Matank was a 28-year-old man from Germany. In 2014, he was on vacation in Bulgaria with some friends. After getting into a fight with some other tourists, Lars injured his ear, and a doctor told him that he couldn't fly. His friends went home, leaving him behind alone. And that's when things started to get strange. He texted his mom saying he felt scared and that he thought someone was following him. He asked her to cancel his credit card. A few days later, he went to Varna Airport, planning to fly back home. But during a routine check with the airport doctor, something spooked him. A construction worker reportedly walked into the room, and that's when Lars panicked. The cameras captured him running out of the office. He left his luggage behind, and he sprinted through the terminal, out the doors, and into the nearby woods. As he ran, he reportedly shouted, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." And that was the last anyone ever saw of him. Since then, people have speculated endlessly about what happened. Everything from a sudden psychotic break to a possible kidnapping, but no trace of Lars has ever been found.
So what do you got? You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
In this video, a man named Robert Pickton is seen in his jail cell boasting about his heinous crimes. And what crimes were those? Well, let me just start by saying that Robert Pickton's case doesn't even sound like something that happens in real life. It just seems too gruesome to be real. A pig farmer in British Columbia, Canada, Pickton was found to be behind a series of unspeakable crimes. It started with the disappearances of women, many of them working in the downtown east side area of Vancouver. Eventually, Pickton's farm, a large isolated piece of land, became the focal point of the investigation. When a search was carried out in 2002, they found human remains. Some were identified, others were found mixed into meat he'd make sausages with. See, Pickton's parties, which he often threw on the farm, had become a major red flag. He'd lure women there, usually street workers, and a lot of them would never leave. He was convicted of 6 crimes in 2007, but it's believed that Pickton may have been responsible for far more than he was charged with. Authorities didn't have enough evidence to convict him on those, though. I'd never heard of this guy until today, Samuel Little. Turns out he's one of America's most prolific serial killers, and man, the way he describes his crimes is chilling. He sounds like this friendly grandfather telling stories about his younger days. He has this inviting smile, he makes jokes, he comes off as such a pleasant guy. Really nuts. And it also makes sense. It's how he was able to charm his victims before killing them.
By the legs and pull to the water. That's the only one that I ever killed by drowning.
So Samuel Little killed women across the United States from like the 70s to the mid-2000s. He took so many lives. 5 years back, this series of prison interviews were released where he was talking about several of his crimes and the victims, most of which were women. He was convicted of 8 killings but confessed to 93. He died in 2020.
I was living there?
Yeah, Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday.
Stephen McDaniel was a law student. He had a major crush on his neighbor, Lauren Giddings, a crush that soon became an obsession. Giddings went missing in June of 2011, and during an interview with a local reporter, Daniel speculated about her disappearance as though he were just another concerned citizen. But after hearing that a body had been found during the investigation, McDaniel's face went cold, and he had to sit down. Now, this alone didn't raise any red flags. He knew the victim, so finding out that her lifeless body was found just outside your apartment, that would be shocking for anyone. But McDaniel was concerned for a whole other reason. McDaniel had killed her. Authorities later searched his apartment, where they found evidence linking him directly to Giddings' death, like videos taken outside her window. Later, he confessed to strangling and dismembering her body.
I mean, the last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
I've probably done anything a man would want to do with a woman. Obviously, I must be sick somehow.
That is Richard Francis Cunningham, aka the Torso Killer and the Times Square Ripper. Operating mainly in New York and New Jersey during the 60s and 70s, Cunningham targeted women in ways that were deliberately gruesome, earning his nickname because of how he left a lot of the scenes. Again, this is another one of those killers who sounds so nonchalant when describing all the vile things they did, and talking about his double life. Respectable family man by day, something entirely different by night. He openly admits that he used his charm to get close to people, before turning into someone completely unrecognizable. In this clip, the interviewer asks Richard why he removed a certain body part from one of his victims, and this was his response.
To do something different. I mean, she was already dead. I mean, it wasn't something that she was alive. And I wanted to create a sensationalism.
Stephen Port might not look like the kind of person you'd expect to end up on a list like this, which is exactly what made him so dangerous. On the surface, he was a quiet, unassuming chef living in London, but between 2014 and 2015, he was secretly targeting young men through dating apps, luring them in with lies, before taking their lives, performing heinous acts on the corpses, and leaving their bodies nearby, sometimes right outside his own building. In police interviews, he comes off nervous but weirdly casual, constantly changes his story, insisting he just found the body. At one point he says he was just lying there. I didn't know what to do. Over and over, painting himself as this clueless bystander. But the biggest gut punch is that police initially believed him. For months he got away with this, even though the deaths were happening in the same area under suspiciously similar circumstances. When the truth finally came out, it turned out he'd tampered with evidence and lied repeatedly to cover his tracks. The interviews with him are hard to watch, not because he's angry or aggressive, but because he's emotionless, even when describing the moments after each victim died.
Did you write this letter, the CRT 11?
No, did the
Photos of it is found with Daniel.
No.
Arthur Shawcross, also known as the Genesee River Killer, is one of the most unsettling interview subjects ever recorded. And I know that sounds like something people just say. I really mean it in this case. He talks about taking people's lives like he's reading off a shopping list. In one interview, when asked about his victims, he shrugs and says, "I just snapped." That phrase comes up again and again as if it somehow explains everything. Here he is talking about what one of his victims tasted like.
Take a fresh ham, a roast pork, and it's the butt end where it's a little burnt. That's what you taste like.
He describes the acts in graphic detail, almost as if he's proud of them at points, and then immediately he'll change the subject to like trivial stuff like food or movies. It's very jarring, but through it all, there's never any emotion, no reflection. He's just completely flat and cold. Shawcross claimed he had a troubled past and tried to blame his actions on brain damage, but psychologists who have interviewed him says that he shows classic signs of manipulation and just lacks empathy. Watching him talk, it's clear he wasn't out of control, he just didn't care. And that is far more terrifying. An eccentric nobleman in the 18th century swears he's hundreds of years old and keeps popping up in history long after his supposed death. In the middle of Cold War panic, a man in the California desert says he met a blonde visitor from Venus, warning us not to blow ourselves up. And a man on a West Virginia highway says a stranger with a big, eerie grin stepped out of a silver craft, telling him of his distant home planet. These are mysterious people who claimed to be from another world. On May 26, 1828, a teenage boy appeared in the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. He was stumbling around, barely able to walk, barely able to speak. He had 2 letters on him, both unsigned, saying he was a foundling. At first, people assumed he had some kind of disability, but once they started taking care of him, they realized something different was going on. He was physically strong, he learned things incredibly fast, his memory was exceptional, and he had this natural talent for drawing and music. Then Hauser started explaining where he'd been, and the story he told was disturbing. He said he'd spent his entire life, 16 years, locked in a dark underground cell, completely isolated from everyone and everything. He claimed he was fed nothing but bread and water, aside from the substances he was given to keep quiet. His only human contact was with one person, some mysterious figure who taught him a few basic phrases, and that was it. The mayor went public with the story, and suddenly everyone was talking about this boy they were naming Hauser. Rumors started spreading that he wasn't just an abandoned child. People believed he was actually a kidnapped prince, swapped at birth as some sort of conspiracy to alter the line of succession. But unfortunately, Hauser's life didn't get any easier. He was attacked multiple times. In 1829, someone gave him a deep gash across his forehead. He blamed it on a mysterious man in black. And then in December of 1833, someone lured him into a park and attacked him with a blade. And this time, he didn't survive. So, who was this mysterious Hauser? Where was he really from? To this day, we still don't know. His tombstone reading, "Here lies Caspar Hauser, riddle of his time, his birth was unknown, his death mysterious." The Count of Saint-Germain appeared in European high society around 1750. He's got to be one of the most mysterious, eccentric people in history. He showed up at French royal courts and other elite gatherings, sometimes using different names like Marquis de Montferrat. People described him as incredibly wealthy and cultured. He was a composer, a philosopher, a writer. He impressed pretty much everyone that he met. What made him legendary was his claim that he discovered the secret to eternal life. He said he was hundreds of years old. When he spent time with nobility, he would recount historical events with such precise detail that people started believing that he'd actually been there. He spoke multiple languages fluently and talked about life hundreds of years ago like they were just recent memories. And on top of that, he supposedly had deep knowledge of alchemy. There were claims he could change lead into gold. Another odd thing about him, people noticed he rarely ever ate in public, which just kind of added to his mystique. It was like he was this larger-than-life entity who just wasn't bound by normal human biology. The Count died in 1784, officially anyway. See, for hundreds of years after, people claimed to have seen him. As recently as 1972, a man named Richard Chanfray appeared in Paris claiming to be the Count. He even went on French television and supposedly turned lead into gold using a camping stove. George Adamski basically founded the modern UFO contactee movement. It was right during the height of Cold War paranoia. Adamski was a Polish-American writer who claimed that in 1952 he met a friendly extraterrestrial named Orthon in the California desert. Orthon became the prototype for what people call the Nordic alien, essentially a being that looks completely human with blonde hair, attractive features, except supposedly not of this world. According to Adamski, Orthon was from Venus. Adamski went on to write 3 best-selling books describing his encounters with Orthon and his trips aboard their spacecraft, visiting Venus and various other planets. By 1960, his books had sold over 200,000 copies. The big message Orthon was supposedly trying to get across was that humanity was on the brink of destruction, mostly due to atomic weapons. Yeah, very much of its time. And a lot of these reports from the 50s shared this exact same message. And that's an interesting thing about these types of stories. The visitors from these other worlds almost always reflect the deepest anxieties society is going through at any given time. I think that's very telling. This one comes out of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, back in September 1st of 1969. That night, dozens of people claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky over Sheffield. Some described them as being attached to a disc-shaped craft, and even stranger, a lot of witnesses said they couldn't account for chunks of time after watching it. It wasn't just like, I saw lights and went home. People felt like something really happened to them. One of the most talked about witnesses is Thomas Reed. He was only 9 at the time, riding in a car with his mom, brother, and grandmother. He said they first saw glowing orbs shoot out from the trees along the road. When they got near the Sheffield Bridge, things got even weirder. It came to a stop off the right side of the road. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. There was like a barometric change in pressure. It was just like a dead silence. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud, and that was it, end quote. Next thing they knew, they were back in the car, but 2 hours had passed. His mom and grandmother had even switched seats, and no one could explain how. Reed later said they regained flashes of memory about being inside some massive hangar with curved hallways, and other people were there too. As for where they were, who the hell knows? This next story was shared by a now deleted Reddit user and goes as follows. Okay, I don't really know how to explain this without sounding insane, but I've been thinking about it for years and I still can't make sense of it. Back in 2016, I was driving home from my job around 2 a.m. I live in a small town, so the roads are usually dead quiet at that time. There's one stretch of highway I always take that goes past a gas station, then about a 15-minute straight before I hit my exit. Well, this time though, something was off. I passed the gas station like usual, but when I looked at the digital clock in my car, it said 2:17. I swear it had been 2:04 the last time I checked. Right as I passed the station, that stretch of road normally takes 15 minutes, but somehow it felt like it just skipped. I don't remember zoning out, I don't remember seeing anything weird. It was just like the time jumped forward and I was closer to home than I should have been. The creepier part is the gas station itself. For a couple months after that, whenever I drove by it, the lights were off. The pumps were wrapped in yellow tape and the sign was taken down. When I asked a coworker about it, they told me that gas station has been shut down for years, but I know I stopped there plenty of times and I definitely remember seeing it open that night. I don't have proof, I know it sounds like bad memory or whatever, but I can't shake the feeling that I've somehow crossed into a place where things aren't exactly the same. On October 11th, 1973, two guys from Mississippi, Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson, went out night fishing in the Pascagoula River. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, but then Parker noticed blue lights hitting the water. At first he figured it was the cops telling them to pack it up, but what came next was nothing close to that. A big light came out of the clouds. Parker later said it was a blinding light. It was hard to tell with the lights so bright, but it looked like it was shaped like a football, about 80 foot. It made a very loud sound. It was just a hissing noise, end quote. Then three strange floating creatures came out of the craft. They didn't have legs, and Parker said they had mitten-shaped claws. One was gray and didn't have a neck. Another looked more feminine. When one of them reached for Parker, instead of panicking, he suddenly felt calm. I think they injected us with something to calm us. I was kind of numb and went along with the program, he said. Both men claimed they were pulled aboard the craft and examined. Hickson remembered. There were no seats, no chain. They just moved me around and I couldn't resist them. I just floated, felt no sensation, no pain. He also described a giant eye-like machine scanning them. He reported everything to the sheriff that night, and deputies secretly recorded them afterward, expecting them to slip up. Instead, they caught the men whispering in fear. Jesus Christ, God have mercy, they had us. They could have done anything to us, Hickson said. For decades, Parker stayed mostly quiet, only writing a book in 2018 after Hickson's death, and that's when other locals came forward saying they saw something strange in the sky that very same night. In 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Villas-Boas claimed he was abducted by aliens. Working late in his fields to avoid the heat, he said he saw a red star approaching, which turned out to be an egg-shaped craft with a rotating red light. Boas alleged that 5-foot-tall beings in gray overalls and helmets captured him and took him aboard, where he was subjected to blood tests and a strange gas that made him violently ill. He also claimed a female alien engaged with him intimately and indicated she would raise their child in space. 4 hours later, he was released and watched as the craft just flew back up into the sky. A lot of people obviously dismissed his story, but a man named Dr. Olavo Fontes noted Boas had burns, bruising, and nausea. Boas later became a lawyer, but he never shook this incident. He'd often craft models of the UFO he claimed to have seen, and he stuck to his story till his death in 1991. A TikToker claims to be traveling through an empty version of Earth, posting videos of eerily empty tourist spots. A Redditor stepped outside and had an undeniable feeling that everything he was looking at was wrong. And in 1901, two women on vacation claimed they slipped back in time. These are mysterious times people claimed to visit a parallel world and came back changed. A TikToker named Kilmaru started uploading videos over 2 years ago, with his first video captioned, "I am very scared." In it, he's filming from his hotel window, looking out at a city street in broad daylight, and there's no one there. Then he walks outside. Restaurants, supermarkets, even a McDonald's, all stocked like normal, but it's completely silent. Since then, he's posted hundreds of videos from places that are normally crammed with tourists: the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the streets of London, amusement parks, the New York City subway, all empty. He claims that he slipped into another dimension, an eerily empty alternate reality version of Earth. His followers throw him challenges, telling him to visit specific spots to prove he's really alone, but every time, it's just him on camera. One of the craziest updates came when someone told him to go to Berlin airport to try and escape. He says he fell asleep in the lounge, then woke up on a massive ship at sea. For 6 days, he explored it before jumping into a lifeboat and making it back to land. And just like that, he was back to wandering through a perfectly normal-looking world where he's apparently the only person alive. Now, of course, I don't know whether you believe in the alternate reality thing or not, but it is impressive that he's managed to film so many iconic locations with no one else in frame. I don't know if he just happens to find super specific times, maybe there's some editing trickery going on, but I think this is an interesting little art project aside from the mystery. Reddit user 17DemonDickS's shared a creepy story with the heading, "I think I stepped into a parallel universe for a moment." They were about 18 or 19 at the time, still living in their childhood home. It was summer, early afternoon, and they were heading out for one of their usual walks to a nearby park, something they'd done almost every day for years. They slipped on their shoes, opened the front door, and stepped outside, and instantly knew that something was off. Nothing looked different. The ravine next to the house, the tree in the yard, the driveway, the neighbors' homes, everything was exactly where it should be, but everything just felt inexplicably wrong. The Redditor said it was like reality itself had shifted in some subtle but deeply unsettling way. They stood there for a moment trying to shake off the feeling before heading down the driveway. About halfway down, they spotted their neighbor across the street tending to his garden. The neighbor looked up, froze. His face went completely pale like he'd just seen a ghost. The neighbor slowly opened his mouth about to say something with this look of terror on his face, but before the Redditor could respond, they were back inside the house, standing at the front door again, hand on the handle, about to step out. This time, though, when they opened the door, the neighborhood felt completely normal again. The neighbor wasn't even outside anymore. Demon D's decided to skip the walk that day. Years later, they still can't explain the feeling. The thing that bothers them the most isn't even the sudden teleportation or the neighbor's terrified expression. It was indescribable wrongness, like they were looking at a completely different version of their own street. Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were English academics who, in August of 1901, took a trip to the Palace of Versailles in France. After touring the main palace, they decided to walk through the gardens where Marie Antoinette used to hang out. They got lost and missed the turn from the main avenue, ending up on a quiet lane. Moberly noticed a woman shaking a white cloth out of the window, while Jourdain saw an old deserted farmhouse with a plow outside. That's when they started to notice this heavy, oppressive feeling wash over them. Moberly later described it as if, quote, everything suddenly looked unnatural, therefore unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry, end quote. Then they came across two men who looked like gardeners but wore long coats and three-cornered hats, very old-timey clothing, even for 1901. Close by, a man sat near a garden kiosk, his face covered in smallpox. As they finally crossed a bridge into the gardens, Moberly spotted a woman sketching on the grass. The lady wore a light summer dress and a white hat. Her hair was old-fashioned. Moberly thought she was a tourist at first, but later became convinced that what they'd both seen was Marie Antoinette herself. Neither mentioned what happened for a week, but after comparing notes and researching some of the history of the place, they believed they had somehow stepped back to August 10th of 1792, just weeks before the French monarchy was overthrown. The story blew up when they published it in 1911 under fake names in their book, An Adventure. Years later, they found an old map that showed the bridge they said they crossed, and that bridge wasn't on any newer maps, cause it no longer existed. It hadn't for a long time. To this day, this is still one of the most famous and well-documented time-slip stories in existence. Reddit user Albert Norman 2069 shared a wild story about what he thinks was a brief trip into an alternate timeline. He says it happened on June 28th, 2014. His day started normally, waking up, brushing his teeth, eating breakfast, and getting in the car for work. But when he switched on the radio, things suddenly got strange. Instead of his usual music station, there was a news talk show playing. The host was talking about a recent victory in the Great War, praising troops in the military. At first, Albert figured it was just about the ongoing withdrawal from Afghanistan, but then the host started talking about the victory in Italy and how this win would finally end a second Great Depression. He was kind of confused, but figured it was just a radio play or something, so he just kind of brushed it all off. This wasn't the last he'd heard of this, though. Later during lunch, Albert overheard coworkers chatting about that same victory in Italy and something about preserving unity. They also kept repeating the numbers 33-13. Finally, he was like, all right, what's going on here? So he asked, what the hell they were talking about, and they looked at him all offended and basically told him that his question was disrespectful to the troops. That's when Albert noticed a coworker named Sam was missing, but But disturbingly, when he asked about him, nobody seemed to know who Sam was at all. On his way home, Albert took a different route through the city, and things just got more unsettling. He noticed there were these banners celebrating the victory, showing Marines landing on a foreign beach. The city also looked way poorer than he remembered. There were abandoned storefronts. Some buildings actually looked like they were crumbling. At home, he turned on CNN, and the anchors were discussing how American forces had defeated Italian logistical targets with minimal civilian casualties, how insurgencies in Greece and Ireland were winding down. At this point, Albert was kind of getting terrified. He had no idea what was going on. Was he losing his mind? Was this a bad dream? Well, he did what anyone would do. He went straight to Wikipedia. That's when he found a detailed page about a war he'd never heard of. It said Europe had collapsed into a civil war with Greece and Ireland occupied by coalition forces facing nationalist insurgencies, that the US was deep in a depression, and the global financial system was in chaos. Albert took screenshots of the pages. After he woke up, those pictures were still on his phone. Yes, he shared them on a Reddit post. This experience led him to wonder about parallel universes, pointing to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. The idea that every decision creates a split, a different timeline. So Albert thinks somehow, just for a day, he slipped into one of those darker alternate realities. This next image is hard to make out, but there's definitely something off-putting about it. The figure has an undeniably ghoulish look about it. It was captured on a home security camera. Amanda Pitt from York County, Pennsylvania says the whole thing started in the early hours of October 21st, 2022. She woke up after hearing loud footsteps moving through the house. At first she assumed one of her kids was wandering around, but when she checked their rooms, they were all fast asleep, and that's when she decided to look at the security camera. What she saw made her stomach drop. The footage showed this strange figure standing in the doorway leading into their kitchen. Thinking someone might have broken in, Amanda woke up her husband, Jeffrey. He searched the house from top to bottom, but found no sign of anyone else inside. No open doors, no damaged locks, nothing out of place. The only thing acting strange was their English shepherd, Ollie, who was pacing back and forth. In New Farm, a suburb of Brisbane, one family kept watching the same stranger show up over and over again in their backyard just to use their pool. Their home security system caught him sneaking through the front gate, checking the windows to make sure no one was home, and then jumping into the pool. Homeowner Holly Stevens was baffled watching the footage. She told reporters, "It just feels a little bit entitled. The man clearly wasn't there to steal anything. He was swimming. He'd show up in running gear, take his shoes off at the door, stretch beside the water, and then start doing laps, all while the family was out." For a long time, they had no idea who this person was. There were articles about it all over the internet, and police had launched an investigation, but it wasn't until recently that the mystery swimmer went public. The man, only known publicly as Matt, told the media that he didn't think anyone lived there and that the place was a, quote, display home. Not buying that. In May 2022, a woman named Kat Grimes from upstate New York woke up one morning and checked her home security camera feed on her phone. What she saw froze her in her tracks. On the screen was the face of a man she didn't recognize, staring right back at her, and the footage showed him inside her home. What made it even more chilling was the realization that this wasn't a time she wasn't home. It might have been while she was actually there. She said, "I was blow drying my hair. I wouldn't have heard him with a blow dryer on. When I saw the timestamp on it, I realized we crossed the same room in the same 10 minutes. As for how he got in, she believes he watched her retrieve her outdoor camera earlier and used that tiny window to slip inside. She'd brought it in to charge. He picked up the camera that was charging on my dining room floor and it snapped his image. I have no idea who this is, show her intention, or why this is happening," she wrote on Facebook. After seeing the footage, Kat was left with a lot of unanswered questions. She told reporters there doesn't seem to be a motive. Nothing was taken, nothing was harmed, to my knowledge. So just kind of left with a lot of unanswered questions at this point, end quote. New York State Police were notified and began investigating, but as of the last reports, the man in the camera snapshot still has not been identified. In February 2022, at a family's apartment in San Bernardino, California, a man broke in through a window around 4:30 a.m. He'd removed the air conditioning unit and crept into the home while the residents were asleep. Rachel Sandoval was asleep during the break-in, and was horrified when she saw the security footage later that day. When my husband showed me the tape of him watching us sleep, it shook me to the core, she said. After entering through the window in a room where their young child usually sleeps, luckily that night they were sleeping in the living room because they were sick, but anyway, after entering, the man casually walked through the apartment. Surveillance video even caught him leaving through the front door and then bizarrely coming back. Now, there was a nurse in the home at the time, tending to their sick child. When the guy tried to come back in through the front door, the nurse woke up and went to the door, and she asked what he was doing, and he replied, "Lock your door, it's not safe." And she just said, "Oh, okay." She didn't realize till watching the security footage later, the guy had already been inside. A lone man standing in front of tanks, never seen again. A masked stranger leaving an empty box at people's doors. And a faceless figure wandering a centuries-old castle. These are mysterious people caught clearly on camera. June 5th, 1989, Beijing. Pro-democracy protests have just been crushed in Tiananmen Square. The streets are tense, and the Chinese military is moving tanks through the city. And then, out of nowhere, a single man walks into the road. He's wearing a white shirt, dark pants, and he's carrying what looks like shopping bags. But he isn't just crossing the street, he stands directly in front of the tanks, stopping them in their tracks. The lead tank tries to go around him, but he moves with it, blocking it. At one point, he even climbs onto the tank, gesturing at the soldiers inside. Nobody knows what he said, or even if he said anything at all. It's all captured on camera, and the footage went around the world almost instantly. But for how famous the image of this man standing in front of these tanks quickly became, we still don't know who he was. Tank Man's identity has never been confirmed, and his fate after that day is a mystery. Some say he was arrested immediately, others think he got away. In March 2025, something weird showed up on a Ring doorbell camera in North Yorkboro, Pennsylvania. A person wearing a homemade mask. It looked like a paper plate with a creepy face and colorful petals taped around it. The person walked up to someone's front door in the early morning hours. He set down a cardboard box, then leaned in close to the camera and said, "I am the box demon. This box is a gift for you." The box turned out to be empty. Police shared the footage and encouraged anyone with info to help figure out who the masked visitor was. Then, just about a day later, authorities announced they'd identified and spoken to the person behind the box demon, but they didn't release their name or explain their motives to the public. So, as for who this person is, we don't know. This image was captured at Chester Castle in England. Nobody knows who or what this figure is. A security guard at Chester Castle got a call from the control room saying that cameras had spotted unusual movement. Normally fearless, his dog, which the security guard described as, quote, the size of a small bear, refused to leave the car, whimpering nervously. When the guard went to investigate, he said he felt 100 eyes on him and felt genuinely terrified. But when he looked around, there was no one, and no signs of anyone entering or leaving the castle grounds. Cameras, however, told a different story. They recorded this strange, faceless figure walking across the area in front of the main gates. It was clearly visible on the footage, moving in a way that no one could explain, and yet no one was physically there when the guard arrived. Staff across English heritage sites have been reporting unusual things for years, from a disembodied hand at Belsley Hall to eerie piano music in the walls of Bolsover Castle, and ghostly figures disappearing into the woods around Rest Park. Louise Fountain, a property manager at Bolsover, said they even keep a ghost book so that staff and visitors can record sightings, sometimes even drawing what they saw. She described cases where visitors felt a child's hand holding theirs, or heard sounds of a bouncing ball long after anyone had left. On November 22nd, 1963, crowds were lining the streets of Dallas, Texas, watching the president's car roll by. Cameras were clicking everywhere, people were filming. In the middle of it all, one woman appeared in photos and footage later nicknamed the Babushka Lady. She wore a headscarf and was standing in a spot where she would have seen everything that happened. She seemed to be holding a camera herself. That means she might have captured one of the clearest angles of the whole thing. The problem, nobody knows who she was. So any photos she took have never been found. The FBI even put out calls for her to come forward, but she never did. Some people think she was just an ordinary bystander, and others wonder if she had a reason for keeping quiet. I mean, it's possible that if anyone wanted certain details hidden, they wouldn't have wanted her images getting out. Whatever the truth, the babushka lady remains one of the most mysterious unanswered pieces of that day. This footage doesn't look all that strange. Security footage outside someone's home capturing a woman trudging through the grass. If you didn't know any better, you'd think she lived there, but she doesn't. And the homeowner has no idea who she is or how she got there. The clip comes from Reddit user ConorBon3R, who writes, "Last night, our security cameras captured a random stranger wandering through our yard. We live up in the mountains, miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by forested mountains with no neighbors nearby. It was pitch black, and the person wasn't dressed for bushwhacking, especially not in the dark. It's seriously the middle of nowhere, and we never see anyone around here."